but it's in your office. Is pointing out. That's
it's
cool.
in my office. But it's
how far could you like zoom in on the street too?
Like I don't. So down? That camera doesn't have a zoom on it, but I could on my Canon. And like you could probably zoom in a decent amount if you really wanted to, which is kind of dope. So, all right, man, you ready to get things kicked off?
Let's do it, dude.
All right, let's go. We are live across YouTube, live across LinkedIn, Twitter right now. So super stoked on it. You guys, welcome to Agency Therapy. If this is your first time, welcome. Where have you been this whole time? If you're an agency owner, this is the spot to be. We got Mr. Raymond Johnston in the building today. Super stoked to have you here, brother.
Dude, I've been wanting to come on this thing for freaking months. I'm happy we finally pulled it off. But honestly, I personally check into agency therapy myself as an agency owner. I need therapy as much as every other agency owner. So I'm just super excited to be here.
Yeah, man. So if you guys don't know Raymond is a partner in an agency called Right Hook Digital. They are, of course, a digital agency. They serve e-commerce clients all over the world. They are one of the powerhouses in the space, but Raymond is one of those guys that is a little bit more behind the scenes. He's a little bit more on the undercover side. D Dang is the CEO over there, and a lot of people know of D, but what they don't know is that Raymond is the freaking man behind the operation, and he is the driver behind it. So super excited to have you on, man, because it's like it's nice to have a different perspective of, like, you know, obviously D has his skills and obviously helps drive a ton of business through the doors, but of course you need the operationally minded people that will help continue to build the infrastructure, build the team, manage the teams, all of that good stuff. And I know there's a great dynamic there between you and D, but at the same time, it's like you need those partners within these large organizations. And, you know, you guys are now working with roughly about 100-person team across multiple different countries, multiple different time zones. And I think you're working across different time zones, but everyone works on the same time zone technically, I think is what we discussed recently. But, you know, how did you get started, I guess, in the digital space? I feel like everyone kind of has like their own origin story of like how we all got into like digital marketing. It's like, for me, like I fell into it almost of like, I didn't even know what digital marketing was. I didn't even know what it took to run an agency. And it was like me and my partner, we just kind of jumped in and started doing it. I'm just curious to hear from your perspective, like how you got started in the digital space.
Dude, this is one of my favorite questions because it was a bit of a logical decision. So here I got my undergrad degree in business, graduated, realized I was a freaking idiot. I didn't know anything. So I spent all my time at the beach playing sports and in the gym. So I was like, well, crap, I should probably get an MBA because I'm an idiot still. And so I got my MBA and I was like, you know what, like what's the one space that I believe that the world is moving towards? And back then, this was like, 2012, I was like, dude, like I need to become an advertiser on paid social, on Google, because like no matter what, like it's always going to be in demand. I didn't realize at the time just how much I was cut out for it. So for me, it was a bit of a logical space. So it was actually, I was getting my MBA, and then an e-commerce brand, about 200 million a year. It's like, hey, would you be interested in working for us? I was like, no. And they actually gave me 3 different job offers and I turned it down. And they said, okay, what do we have to do to make this work? I was like, listen, dude, if I can't get a job where I'm actually doing social advertising or Google advertising, like, I'm out. Like, well, we don't even do that yet. Like their whole business survive off freaking catalogs that they sent in the mail. They said, well, we're not even doing that yet. But if you take this position in the advertising department, you may be able to work your way into doing that. So like, I was like, okay. So I did that. And like my secret, that whole couple year stint was that I was the squeaky wheel. I talked about it so much, like, oh my gosh, like just let this guy do it. So shut up. And like, that's how I did it. And then I ended up doing a lot of great successful campaigns, part of it because like they weren't doing it before. And I'll never forget, I crushed a campaign because they had high seasonality every summer. It was like their busy season. And I made them $1 million in profit. So for them, $1 million in profit of an online campaign when they're making 200 million a year, like it's not that big of a drop in the bucket. But I'll never forget, I was like, dude, like, holy crap. Like I made them $1 million. I could do this. And at the time I was paid hourly, and I asked them for a $2 an hour raise, Josh, because I made $1 million. And they told me no. So I was like, screw this. This sucks. And so I was like, I should try doing freelancing. And then like, that's how I got started, man.
Okay, gotcha. And then eventually you met D somehow. How did that go down? Because obviously
Yeah,
you guys
so
own this agency together now. Curious on how you guys got connected.
that's a wild story. It's so many of the friends I have now I met online. Like I met you initially online. Someone made an
Yeah.
introduction, and then we know we're like 30 minutes away from each other.
Yeah.
And at the time, me and so Scott is our other partner, and we met inside a Facebook group, and they were doing the same thing. I was doing the same thing. We did a
Yeah.
project together, and we're like, okay, like we're cut from the same cloth. We have very similar mindsets. We're freaking aggressive people, but we're also I like to call we're aggressive, but we're extremely we have high integrity. Like we really care about like having high integrity
Sure.
and character. And we say, hey, what if crazy idea? What if we became one agency? Because Ray, you got more American clients than we have. We have more Australian. But what if
Yeah.
we did this a crazy idea where we combine, we grew the US market and grew the Australian market, and now we're like a global agency. We're like, yeah, that's it. That's the thing. And so like, okay,
That's the
like let's
thing.
make this happen. So they consumed me and my clients, and we kept the name Right Hook because Right Hook's freaking amazing. Like my
Yeah.
name before that was Social Hacker.
Yeah.
And to this day, I still get
Social hacker.
yeah. To this day, people go to that Facebook page, and I get like these people from India saying, "Help me hack girlfriend's account." I was like, "No, wrong social hacker."
Yeah. Oh,
But
that's
yeah,
too
and
funny.
so the name Right Hook we kept it because it was so good. And yeah, dude, that's how we did it. And that was 4 years ago.
Okay. Awesome. Now everyone thinks that right hook comes from Gary Vaynerchuk's
All the
book,
time.
Jab, 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 Right Hook. What is it actually named after? What was
We
kind
get
of the
that all the
idea
time.
and methodology behind naming it Right Hook?
So if I understand the story correctly, it was Scott and Dee when they were like just a couple of clients, like, what are we going to call this thing? And they came up with all these weird, crazy names. And Scott's wife walked in the room, and she doesn't know who Gary Vee is. She doesn't know anything about marketing. She's like, well, you guys advertise, right? He's like, yeah, well, you guys you like to scale brands, right? He's like, yeah. So she's like, what if you like the right hook of marketing? You come in like and knock it out. He's like, yeah, it's a great idea. So it honestly was completely coincidental, but we
Yeah.
do get that question a lot, and we probably actually get business from it too, if I'd be lying, over
Yeah.
4 years.
100%. 100%. So, fast forward a couple years down the road now, and you guys are, once again, all across the world. You got employees in a bunch of different time zones. What has it been like to just from beginning, like this is before even COVID hit, being 100% remote? And what were some of the learning curves that you guys had to go through in order to get a full team remote? And correct me if I'm wrong, you guys have roughly around 100 people
That's
staffed
correct.
right
That's
now.
correct.
To me, like that just seems like madness. Like our agency had roughly about 25 people staffed at its highest capacity, and 100 just seems like just wild to me, especially all remote where you have to be able to manage all these employees. Like to me, like 100 employees, and I don't even know how like the largest brands actually do this, but I'm like, I would lose track of someone, and someone would probably just be flying under the radar, not working at all, and I'd be like, I totally forgot they worked here.
That is a great question. And I just want to say the only way we make it work before I dive into the details, because we have really great people who care about coaching, frankly. Like fundamentally, it's all about coaching and about a certain number of direct reports per each team lead. Like fundamentally, that's how it works. But the learning curve, dude, honestly, like we're still learning. I can tell you some principles that we've adopted over the years that help with it, but we still learn. Like it's still a struggle and a challenge. And I'd say the biggest principle, anyone that works remotely, is the intentionality has to be so much greater than if you're in office. Like I can't swivel my chair and see you, Josh, like, hey man, like either one, you're not doing work, you're on your phone, or hey, number two,
Yeah.
you don't feel good, like you're down in the dumps. Like the intentionality to like really find that out, like your EQ, you have to be really sensitive to pick that up in calls. Cause like when I hop on a call, like I put a face on, but I hop off the call, you don't see like my depression or whatever. So number one, insane intentionality. So how we do that is every single person in the company, no matter what, has a coaching call with a team lead, no matter what. Now, the frequency can differ. Typically, as a baseline, it's a minimum of once a month. But if a person that needs it, we increase that, but at a minimum. So what that means is we have team leads. Now we have like department team leads. We also have like maybe one team has 2 or 3 team leads, because we have to maintain that every 8 people has a team lead. No more than 8. It can be as low as 6, because otherwise 8 is too much. And so sometimes those team leads they're also not client facing, but some of those team leads also have their own work. And so we'll comp them where, maybe we'll lessen the work a little bit so that they can spend more time like with the one-on-one. But as a minimum for remote work, you have to have that so that they're checking those people's work. They're checking how they're doing personally. They're also checking to see like, how are you progressing in your own career, personally, with life. And the only way that happens is with insane intentionality. So I think that's number one.
Yep.
Number two is just really critical standards. So while we are remote, how we work is US teams only work with US brands, and AU brands, Australia, only work with Australian brands. So how we do it is that the teams that work on that, they all work at the same time zone. And so, for example, like we have a large team in the Philippines that help with a lot of our support roles, and they're freaking incredible, by the way. Like I will go to bat for our Filipino teams, and they work off their pods because we have a pod structure time zone. So that's one way to facilitate it. And also, everyone has huddles. So because like with remote work, like you need a lot of frequency. Like the worst thing that happens is like they fly under the radar, like what you said, and like they disappear and you don't know what the heck is happening. So frequent huddles daily. Second one is everyone on their calendar time blocks. So we have everyone on our team say, here's when you're online, here's when you're offline, here are your non-negotiables in your life. Everyone has non-negotiables. Like for me, it's gym time. You look at my calendar in the morning or afternoon, Raymond's got gym time. So people know Ray's not going to answer, but he'll answer when he gets back. But we have to have those because we have to know when someone's online, offline. And then the other one is insane intentionality with overly communicating. Like if you're going to be offline, we have everyone in their team's channel message like, hey, I have to be offline, or hey, something came up, I have to take my kid to this thing. You have to have that intentionality. So like over time, those are the standards or principles we use to follow to run a remote team.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Yeah, it makes a ton of sense, man. And like I said, hats off to you guys. Like it's not an easy thing to manage that many people across that many different time zones, but it makes sense how you guys are tearing things out. And I like that, like 6 to 8, like direct reports per management. It seems like a really smart way to make sure that everyone's pulling their weight, and making sure that everyone has what they need, has all the resources that they need. Right. So if you guys are dropping in, say what's up in the chat. If you have questions for Raymond and myself, feel free to drop them in the chat as well. We'll get around to them. We'll kind of continue with some topics. Don't forget, like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Would appreciate it. Helps us out tremendously, reach more people, and be able to help people build their agencies a little bit more efficiently. So kind of transitioning Ray into, outside of like the backstory and a little bit about what's going on inside of Right Hook right now. Obviously, this is the craziest time of year, especially for ecom agencies. We are in the Q4 hustle. What has been some of the prep work like coming into this Q4, and kind of taking your team from, not necessarily like a like maintenance mode, but like obviously like you're scaling throughout the year, but what is it like to get the team rallied for Q4? Obviously, we have the like all of the madness that's going to be going on inside of the accounts probably within the next 30 days or so. Like this is where we really start to ramp up. Like, is there increased communication? Like, what's happening on your guys' end right now across the team? Is it just madness right now? Are you guys like, is everyone's hair on fire? Give us a little insight on what's going on.
Dude, we are freaking dialed in. So my team, they joke a little bit that I'm probably the most Black Friday hyped man on the planet. Like I live all year long just so I can live through Q4. Like it is my time. And over the years, I'm so pumped about it that, dude, we're dialed. I haven't met anyone that's as dialed as us. And I can say that confidently. So our prep start in July. Like that's when we really start hitting the ground running. So for us, to break it down simply, first thing in July, what we do is we kick off with timelines. So the timelines are when our team needs to have things completed with the clients. That's where that early they start talking about, okay, what goals we want to hit. Inventory, we need to hit those goals. Ad spend, we have to prep for banks and everything, cash flow to hit those goals. So like we've been starting since July, and the honest truth is that even though we're still kind of hamstrung to brands having honestly their crap together, frankly. But sure. So typically what we do, and we've been testing this over the years, is we actually have a training series we send clients through. So
specifically for Q4.
For Q4 specifically, yeah. So we actually sent them a video series that walks them through our strategy, how we're going to plan, what we need from them. So it kickstarts the conversation, because like the hardest part, and even us, we've acquired clients recently in Q4, is that brands just don't really understand what they're signing up for when they come into bed with us for Q4.
Yeah.
And so we want them to come from an informed place, and then a common understanding of terminology and strategy of what we're going to run, so they know what they're getting in for. So that's the first thing we do. And then our team, like, we have timelines and deadlines of what we have to complete in what weeks. Internally, we also have, leading up to Q4, we have fortnightly and weekly meetings just about Black Friday, about where are you guys at, what are your struggles, how can we help you get on target, for example. We forecast for brands. And then where we're at right now is our team, most of our team are finishing up their creative assets, or they're getting them approved from clients. Because years have taught me that if you don't do ahead of time, Facebook or Google or Klaviyo craps out, and then you're pissed because you're up to 2 a.m. trying to get everything done. So we always tell our team to have everything done and published a week before whenever their campaigns have to start, whether that's teasing or whatnot. So we're pretty dialed when it comes to Q4.
Yeah. So you guys are dialed in, like ready to roll. So a lot of the legwork has already been pretty much completed. Obviously, there's a lot of continuing management that goes on during this time. But as far as like the strategy goes, like you guys are pretty much set.
Yeah, and one thing we're testing this year is, as you know this, because working with the brands you work with, also the agencies, is that sometimes the success of a Q4, it's not everything is within your control as the agency, right? So for us, we do paid acquisition and we do retention. Well, we can't make all the decisions for them. So what we've been testing this year is like, okay, the areas that we can't control, but is interdependent on us being successful, what resource or training can we make for our brands and send it to them so they know pretty much what to prepare. So for example, simple thing we've done is we can't manage all of our brands retention. We just don't have capacity. Like we're maxed out, 100% maxed out. So we actually made a survival guide that says, okay, we can't run it for you. That's okay. Here's a copy and paste of what we will do. Copy and paste these things. And so that our team can keep them accountable to make sure they do it, to make sure that that part of our strategy is solid, even though we can't manage it for themselves. And so we're testing that, doing those kind of resources this year, because like our philosophy is, if we can't do it, how can we give those brands the tools to make them successful? So as a flow-on effect, our teams can still be successful.
Yeah, 100%. No, that's right on, man. I absolutely love that. It's also a good segue into something new that you guys just kind of launched recently, which is retention within the agency. I know you have been just a mile deep on the retention side, learning email marketing, learning the systems behind email marketing, and something that you guys are like, we need this and we need to do this for our brands. What was the kind of aha moment for you guys of like, okay, like we're a paid ads agency, we need retention?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Josh. It was evolution of where we're at. We weren't by any means tapped out when it comes to paid acquisition. It was more of the hard part is how many times you can accept a loss when it wasn't within your control. Do you start to ask yourself, okay, how can I take this within my control? So for us, retention was that thing. So and for those of you guys who are watching, for those of you guys who know Ecom, it's, retention is such a massive part of the success of a business and the profitability of the business, but it's not within our control. We can't force a brand to do it, even though we give them recommendations. So we thought, hey, like, what's the ideal scenario? The ideal scenario is that we can control as much of a brand's marketing as possible, so that we know we are in full control of their success and profitability, because like we consider ourselves profit partners. And how can we not control one of the biggest levers of profit? And that's on the retention side. So for us, it was like, we need this strategically. The one mistake I'll tell you, Josh, that I did, and I finally learned this lesson, but it was the last time I had to learn this lesson, is I was like, you know what? I think we also need a Google team as well, because we were just paid social at that time. So I launched 2 departments in the new services at the same time. And that was a huge mistake, because it's like building 2 whole new agencies at the same time. But it's worked out well. Like we're at 100% capacity, but I would not recommend anyone doing that. Stay focused.
Yeah, 100%. It's like one thing at a time. Get it into a place where it can be managed by someone else, and
Exactly.
that way you can stack other services on top. Something that you and I had talked a little bit more in depth on the retention side was capacity and increasing capacity across the team. Um, how did you kind of find out or discover that you guys were not at capacity, even when the team says we're at capacity? And this is something that we see across a lot of the agencies that we work with is we get the hey, we're at capacity or we can't handle more. What are some of the strategies that you've implemented? Because you said, hey, truly we're at 60%, 70% capacity, and there's still a ability for us to, because obviously when we talk about capacity, we also have to include team meetings, team trainings, all of those things as like part of that capacity. And our rule of thumb is always we want our team at 80 to 85% capacity. How are we able to squeeze maybe another 5 to 10% of capacity out of the team?
Great question. And to add to what you said, the reality with team meetings, like we think someone can work 40 hours a week. The reality is like 32 hours a week.
Sure.
I know you and Chris, Nick are huge on like utilization. And reality, it's like 32 hours a week is truly like what you should be benchmarking, like what a person actually does, because like they have other like admin stuff.
Yep.
And so it really came down to like just curiosity. I think curiosity, I think it's a skill we should all probably utilize a lot more. Is one to just prove your theories, but two, just to see like what is possible. And it came from a place of just curiosity, partly, where I was like, okay, they're feeling pressure, they're feeling tapped out. Is that really tapped out? Like what? And so I'm going to reveal a little bit of my nerdness real quick. So
Sure.
I'm a huge comic nerd. I've collected comics since I was a little boy. I have buckets full of comics. I have the first Wolverine comic from 1984 ever published. I have it hanging in my room. Not
That's
Wolverine,
incredible.
but it was actually, there's a comic strip about Batman. Someone was like talking to Batman, and he's like, if I set limits, then I'll know what they are. So I don't set limits on myself. And like, I always think about that. I'm like, you can never afford to know your limits. You never will know your limits if you're always like, if you put a limit on yourself, because you could always break through those. Hope that makes sense. Makes sense in my mind.
Yeah.
And so I was like, what is the limit? Truly, what is the limit? So curiosity started it. And so so how the process we go through is, so at Right Hook, we've really adopted a Toyota way of running a company. We're not perfect. We're still implementing it, but there's some Japanese terminologies like Gemba. So Gemba is Toyota uses this, and it means go and see. That's what it means, go and see. And the reason why, especially remote, that is so critical is because everything that happens in remote work is invisible. All you see is the output and what's on a Zoom call. And so, but the hard part is that because everything's invisible, it's like a big black Pandora's box, and you don't actually see how work is being done. And so Gemba, how it came from is like, imagine making Toyota cars and trucks, but it means you go to the manufacturing floor where people are actually doing the work, and you watch them do the work, not because like you have a magnifying glass on them, but because like the people closest to the work often have the best ideas of what the problems are and how to fix it. So that's just like a good philosophy and principle to have. So since we've adopted this, what that means is like, okay, I'm gonna go to the Gemba, and I just want to see how my team does the work. I just want to watch it. Sure. So what I've been doing is, whether people can think I'm crazy, and maybe I am a little crazy, Josh, you probably know me. You know me well enough now, is I told my team, I was like, all right, when you guys do your work this week, I want you to just pull up Loom, record yourself doing your work. Just do your work, because I can't sit next to you because we're like all over the freaking world.
Sure.
Take me virtually to where you work. I just want to see how awesome you guys are and see you guys do your work. And took a little bit of coaching to get there. So I've been watching their calls, their calls. I've been watching them do their work. And by doing that, you find so many great inefficiencies and opportunities that's how you can get that extra capacity out of them, because you realize Sally over here, she doesn't know how to project manage, like even though we have a project management tool. And so that's wasting time. We realize Rick over here is doing this thing, and then Eddie over here is doing this thing. And by watching, like, oh my gosh, like if I could help them streamline this, or standardize so everyone's doing it the same way, like that is how you find inefficiencies. And so like for remote, any agency who's listening to this, hopefully you listen to it, it's like that is where you get your inefficiencies, because efficiencies equals profit straight up.
Yeah, 100%. Oh, dude, that's was music to my ears right there. I
I
love
figured it
that.
would be.
Yeah. And it's insane because like this is something that I never had the opportunity to do in my agency is actually like sit with them and actually watch them do the actual work. It's just I think sometimes we leave our team to their own devices and
Totally.
yeah, and we just don't really get that opportunity. Like we just think everything is optimized because we put SOPs in place and because we have good process from onboarding to fulfillment. And it's like and sometimes we have to get back in the trenches with the team, educate them, see what they're doing, see where the mistakes are being made, and continue to optimize even further.
Well,
Which is
you and Nick, I'd love to get your opinion on this. Like, I think different evolutions of where you're at in agency land maybe require different things. Like,
yep,
because you guys have so much data and you're so close to so many agencies. I'm guessing, and this is where I want to ask you is probably the people who are newer. Like, I just need to hire help. Like for them, what do you think? Like, when's the right time for a person just like you just got to hire help and just run with the SOP versus the next time in your evolution where you have to then re-optimize how work is done?
yeah. Yeah, so normally it's based off a couple things. Like if we're just getting started with an agency and they're looking to bring on people, obviously we're going to make sure that it's a measured approach, and normally it's going to start with contracted work before we bring on someone full time. We want to make sure that that revenue is
Great.
sticky enough. So agreement terms are really important to us. Of like, what is the revenue that we're expecting over the next 3, 6, 12 months, and can we support a W-2 employee for that time? What does the lead flow look like? Because if we have shorter term agreements in place, okay, well, what does the pipeline look like? We might still be able to bring in a W-2 employee because W-2 employee is a much larger commitment, in my opinion,
Totally.
than just a contractor, right? And contractors like they are kind of under the impression that they're coming in to fulfill on a project, right? And if that when that project is finished is when their contract is up, right? And so that's why we like to utilize contractors. We're not afraid to utilize contractors to fill capacity in uncertain areas that we're just like, hey, we're not sure if this is continued growth, if this is the new normal for us of like a new revenue threshold. And those are all things that we want to take into consideration as we kind of compare our workload to, when we want to bring on new employees. So it is a very measured approach that we want to take. We don't want to just, and this is what we see a lot of times with agencies is that they are just overstaffed
Totally,
and they are just sacrificing a ton of profit for the ability to step away and work on higher leveraged activities, right, for the business when that's really not what the business needs.
Totally.
So,
And just to back up what you said, like we saw on our retention team, we actually have one pod who's part-time as like a contractor, mainly because she couldn't do full-time, but she was good enough. We want to be part-time. And it's making me rethink my model, but her pod profit per the team that they run is actually higher than W-2 employees. Even though she has less brands, like it's comparable, but she's working less, but the profit is significantly higher. And so it's even making me rethink my model when it comes to that routine.
100%. And that's the thing is like, with contractors, however they're getting paid, if it's just for the project, it's like they're going to get that project done in a timely manner because if they're freelancing with other types of brands, the more capacity that they can have to work on other projects, the more that they're going to get paid. Whereas in W-2 employees, not saying that this is the case for everyone, but can get a little stagnant from time to time because they're comfortable, right? And it's not necessarily, and this is something that we also talked about, maybe it's a good transition as well, is that, you had an employee come to you of like, hey, like, I want to make X amount of money. I want to make more money. And well, it was like, hey, like, logistically, this just doesn't make any sense. Like we just can't do this. But if you can take on 2 extra brands, and we can increase your capacity, then we can give you this raise. And he was like, yeah, like I can do that. Awesome. Now you're squeezing more out in capacity. Your employees getting what they wanted. Sorry, I just like told your whole story for you. I didn't even give you the opportunity.
I can add to it. And
yeah.
And you're right. And I think, and that's the hardest part, especially when you have a business is like, especially, and this is one worth looking up in 2023 is when you don't have a standardized way of comping. So we have progression paths that give us some standard for copying, but not everything falls within that linear plan, that standard.
Sure.
So And so we're like this is a problem because the bigger you get, the more and more this happens. And luckily for that scenario, there's two things why I can make that call. Why I can make that call. The first is because we are running a pod structure. Each pod is like its own business, has its own P&L. And we have standards for each pod, like the KPIs you have to hit. So because we did that, I had the fortitude where I could say, hey, and this is what I think everyone should take away from this is like, I brought that person in. I was like, here's your pod P&L. I have to maintain this line. Do you see this? Yeah, I see that. Okay. And you have to maintain this line. That's your KPI. Okay. Together, we only have a couple decisions. You want to get paid more. I can't increase the cost of your pod. Do you see that? Yes, I see that. Okay. So what options do we have? Well, we can charge more for your current clients if they don't leave, right? Or you can take on 2 more brands that then raises your pod revenue, and then I can give you that extra bump, for example. So for me, luckily, like he was very logical. He sees it. And I think that's why, like, tell them the reason why. Because a lot of times, and not every time is perfect, but like, hey, someone asks, hey, can I have a bump? We're like, no. Like, tell them why. And like, I really believe in like, show them your company P&L, show them whatever, so they can see the reason why. But if you can find a way, say, hey, I can't for these reasons, but if we could do X, Y, and Z, I can, then do it. Because like, it helps them get their eye on the prize. It gives them hope. Plus, and now lets them know, and it trains them, frankly, that there's a reason why I do things. But if you work with me towards the company's alignment of more revenue, more profitability, you can come along the way and get more as well. So I really like that. And thankfully, like that situation worked out well.
Yeah, 100%. And that's the thing is like it's hard to refute any of that, right? When they see the numbers of like how profitable a certain pod is, and like you have to hit a certain baseline, and it's like this is how we can do it, right? And like we get you what you want, and then obviously we get more capacity out of this pod. But I mean, really, it truly is the best way to do it, and that's the importance of knowing your numbers. And this is something that we preach to our clients all the time. Of like, that's why we have them fill out KPI trackers. That's why we push data tracking for them so hard. Is so when you go to the table with employees, and obviously there's a lot more use to knowing your data than just that. But it's like just one example of many of knowing your data and how it's useful when it comes to like making big business decisions, like giving people raises and bringing on new employees.
One thing as well is me and that person, like we have a good relationship, and I think it would not have flown as well if I had hired him and like I left him to his own devices and we didn't have a relationship or trust built up. And I think that's critical. If you have that, you'll find people will not only go to bat for you, they'll stick around longer. Plus, they're willing, frankly, just to take on more, just to be fully transparent with you.
Yeah.
But if you don't have that, then like they're gonna look for the next shiny object syndrome or the next highest paycheck. But I think like that's critical. Like agency, like that's honestly, man, like starting an agency, that's the one thing I never even crossed my mind I have to deal with. I thought the whole time I'm just scaling out accounts and selling.
Well,
it's so
and that's
much
the
more.
thing is it's such a profitable model until you start to hit scale, right? And as you hit scale, things get a little bit more complex. Profit really starts to get drained out of the company because your overhead just increases as you have a lot more people, right? And we think that we can run it the same way that we ran it when we were a 10-person team, and it's like, as a 10-person team, like I get it. Like you can get away with it because you're scrappy and there's less moving pieces involved. But if you're wanting to become an agency that pushes on that 7-figure per month, range, then this is what it takes, right?
Yeah, and so a mutual friend of ours, Jake Schmidt, obviously, Nick, a partner of Nick's, him and I actually at the Hydra Council. Thank you for you. If it wasn't for that council, I wouldn't have had this conversation with Jake. And we talked about this, and I don't think he'd mind me sharing. He's like, because I asked him, I was like, all right, Jake, level with me, dude. How does structure break? That the 7-figure a month mark. He's like, honestly, man, had nothing to do with selling or doing more. He said had everything to do with it's the right people and the right management in place. And that's where, as you scale, like you said, what got you to point B is not going to get you to point C typically. And so like that middle management layer, dude, is everything at scale. It's everything. Because like they are the front line, they are the coaching, they're the people who are helping those people below them to grow, progress, hit KPIs and all that.
Yep. Oh, 100%. Couldn't agree more. Kind of transitioning, I'm gonna bring up a topic that might bring some PTSD back into your life a little bit. Losing some large clients. We've all had it happen before. And you guys just kind of went through this period of losing a few of your like very long lasting clients. Like I think it was like 3 to 4 years you've been working with some of these clients, and then they end up bringing an in-house team in place, and you're like, well, dang, like it sucks, but at the same time, it's like we get it. What's some of that transition look like? Of like, hey, like we lose a big retainer, or like it is like a downtime. Like, how do we get the team to rally back? I guess, but like first is like what is the initial reaction to losing a large retainer? Let's start there. And what does the war room so-called look like when you and like the leadership team really jump in and start talking about, okay, like what are we gonna do?
So if you had asked me earlier in the year, my eye would be twitching probably, but we've recovered. So
yeah, of course.
Your timing is great. So yeah, so to answer your first question is like, honestly, man, like you have to keep a certain amount of EQ. And I'll never forget, like it was actually my wife a couple years ago who like really helped me get over this. Because dude, when I would lose a client, I would just be down in the dumps. Like especially when you perform, that's the worst. You perform, you do great work, and they still leave. It's like, what the heck? And it wasn't until like I was in the kitchen one time, I was down in the dumps as usual, like pity party, frankly. And my wife's like, dude, like, isn't that the job? Isn't that what you signed up for? Isn't that the gig? And I was like, yeah, I guess you're right. Like that's just the game that you play.
Dang.
So I know, like tough love, man.
Dang. Wife coming in the clutch, bringing a little bit of reality back into it. I love it.
And that really changed emotionally for me. It still stings. But so when it happens, is the hardest part is how can you help the team that managed it? How can you help them get through it? Because that's the worst. Because like it demotivates them. Because in our pod structure, we also have bonus compensation as well. Like it hurts their and their team's bonus as well.
Yep.
And like the worst part is like how can you keep them from getting to them and like hurting the rest of their performance? So I think that's the biggest one, like how we deal with it. And the second one is every lost client, there's a learning moment you can learn from it, no matter what. And so, for example, like, would you mind sharing some of our learning moments? I think that would help other agencies.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So first is like, so for example, if you guys go to my Twitter, the first like pinned tweet is like the only tweet I've had that's like the most reaction. So I pinned it so everyone can see my failure is like we lost a massive client. It was like a 50K a month client, dude. Like we've had them for years. It was awesome, right? Until it wasn't awesome. And so in performance is good. We've done amazing work for them for a long time. But so the learning from in that scenario is if we were paying attention, we could have spotted the signs earlier. So there's little things, and that's what's hard is like when you're in a client relationship, like you have to trust your gut and the moment you see something, you have to react to it. Like don't be on the front foot, always be on the front foot. So for example, there was little signs of like, hey, I'm feeling like this, or hey, like that invoice is pretty high. Like those are all little flags. Doesn't mean they're going to leave right away. But in that situation, what you can learn from it is it's not a matter of if, but when a client leaves. No matter what agency you're in, every client's going to leave you at some point. And for example, Chick-fil-A, like a $1 billion company, they had an advertising agency for 25 years, and then they cut them. So even they probably thought Chick-fil-A is never going to leave. But they learned that lesson, didn't they? For us, so what we try to do now is like we're actually on the front foot about like, hey, we know this may not last forever. We know like we're going to grow to a point, and it may be better served for you to go in-house. That is okay. When that happens, we will help you make the transition. So that's where like a principle we have with our team is like always be on the front foot. Because if you're on the front foot, you control the narrative. But if you're on the back foot, like they freaking own you. So that's principle number one. I'm sure you probably agree with that one.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, got to be proactive about it, right?
Yeah. Another principle as well is especially when it comes to losing a large client is more than likely it could have been avoided. So a couple of things we've done is like we have like a client health report. So every week we get a status of a client's health with us. And now, which I share with you over the weekend as well, like we even have probabilities of like after so many flags, like we know the probability that a client's going to leave based off historical data. And so for us, it just helps us to give a little bit more insight. Okay, now the client's a 45% chance of leaving. Okay, let's put this kind of plan in action And so if nothing else, if they leave, our sales team also knows to swap in someone else when that happens. So you're not like vacant and paying for that cost.
Right. Of course. Smart. That's incredible. Real quick, just fielding some questions, and maybe what we could do as well is if you guys want to come in live, ask Raymond some questions here. Drop it in the chat, and I'll drop you a link to join us. We can bring you in individually, and you can actually chat live with us. But Nicholas Kirchner asked, what kind of training do you do / frequency meeting with your middle management?
Oh yeah, Nicholas, great question. Honestly, man, it's extremely frequent. So the training is more so in terms of, for example, we have them read books. That happens all the time. So that's a little thing. Also, the training is in terms of feedback. So I'd say the training is more like on the job training with like critical feedback. So that happens every single week. So for example, one of my team leads, he's actually going through a situation right now where someone on his team, they had a less than stellar team and client experience. So that's something where I've noticed it in our weekly catch up. I give him this feedback of like, hey, and then I ask him like, you saw the situation? Yes, I saw it. How are you going to handle it? Okay. Walk me through how you're going to handle it. So like for us, the training really never stops because one of our core values is to have radical candor and to have feedback. So the training is every single week. And so we just have this mentality that no one is above coaching. No one, even me, like in D, like D is my coach. And like, we've been in this together since like pretty much day one, but it's because every human has a blind spot and you just need another coach just to help point out a blind spot you have. Like I have blind spots. Josh has blind spots. Everyone's got blind spots. You just need a third party perspective.
Yeah, 100%. And honestly, that's part of like why I love our consultancy is like that's the great part about it. Like I feel like is the biggest lever that we pull is third party outlook on the organization, right? I love that you said that.
And I've talked to people in Hydra, and like that's exactly what it is. Like you and Nick, like you guys have a vantage point that people don't have. So you're able to spot, hey, you're missing the ball here, or hey, you just need to focus on this thing. These other things are just noise. And like that's why it's so great, because like you guys have done the experience, and then you just have the vantage point that a normal human doesn't have, because like we're in the weeds. Like we need that third party perspective.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Cool. If you guys have questions, drop them in the chat. If you're tuning in from Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, drop them in the chat. We'd love to hear from you guys. Also, if you want to join us live, I dropped the link in the YouTube chat as well, so you guys can join this one right here. You can jump in, ask us questions, join us live and jam with Ray and I for a few minutes here. As people are kind of asking questions in the chat, as people are potentially joining into the video chat with us, one thing that I wanted to kind of talk about as well is obviously I don't want it to be too doom and gloom, but obviously like we're heading into a little bit of a rough time. Technically we're in a recessionary period, 2 quarters in a row of the GDP falling. What does it kind of look like for you guys in preparation for potentially some turbulent times? When it comes to running an agency, normally people's knee-jerk reaction is we're going to pull marketing budgets. What does it look like from your end of like educating clients? How are you guys going about kind of prepping for more of like a doomsday type season?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I'll tell you what I'm going to do, but I'd love to hear even what you guys are seeing, because you guys, I mean, I'm a silo, like I'm a bubble. It's just me and the agency. Like you guys have pretty information and data of like many different agencies. So for us internally, the biggest one is like we look at there's a book called Good to Great. If you guys ever read it, there's a principle they talk about like what makes a great company. Oxygen canisters. Cash is oxygen. So for us, just a cash buffer. Like that's what weathers the storm. And then so like that's one principle we're living by. So we have a cash buffer, frankly. And so we can survive 3 to 4 months of overheads and employee salaries just on a cash buffer.
And that's if you're bringing in $0.
Correct. If we're bringing in 0, that's correct.
Yeah.
And that's
100%.
That's because my partner Scott exercised another principle from Good to Great: productive paranoia. Paranoia is a good thing.
100%, and that's Nicholas on our side for sure. We built up our war chest, and I did a good job building it before Nicholas came on as well. But that is something that we were like, hey, no matter what, we're gonna be like, if we bring in $0, we have a war chest to get us through currently probably 5 to 6 months
That's
of our
awesome, dude.
expenses.
Great job, man.
And obviously part of that as well is like we want to utilize some of that. This time is prime for wealth building, right? There's going to be discounts on assets. There's going to be discounts on even advertising, right?
Talent.
Yeah, talent as well. And so having these cash stores, and I love that that's where you led off to. Having these cash stores is how you're actually going to be able to grow your business exponentially. And so, with that being said, it's like one, having cash on hand is going to be really important. But also, you can't be afraid during this time. Like you have to play a
Agreed.
little bit of offense, and people will pull marketing budgets like that, like 100%. Like that is going to happen. But for us, like it's been, we've had to educate people on hey, like when people pull marketing budgets, it's going to allow everyone else to have a discount on buying media, on getting in front of people, and these audiences are going to be bought at a discount, and there are going to be people that take advantage of this time, and there's going to be people that unfortunately they don't have the cash position, or they just get too scared and they hold on to their cash too close to the chest, right? And so you can't be afraid to spend, but at the same time, we should have had cash stores in place already. And if you don't have cash stores in place, this is the wake up call to make sure that you're not spending frivolously. And I'm not talking about like an $8 coffee, right? I'm talking about the really big expenses in life,
Subscriptions and like crap like that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Just stuff that you don't really need, and a lot of it is like some of it's even lifestyle, right?
I was going to ask about that. Like, are you coaching people even to like, hey, can you trim up your salaries a little bit, or taking profit out of the business just to build up that chest so you can go on the offense?
Yeah, good question. So, obviously so what we do is we follow a very like what we consider like a profit first methodology. So if you've ever read the book by Mike McCallum, it's Profit First. At a minimum, we take 10% of our top line and bring it into a profit account just for storage.
Perfect.
Right. And so for that, it's like, in 2 years of running our business, we've been able to build, almost, a pretty hefty, storage of cash just from that alone. Now, of course, we have an operating expense account too that we operate out of, but it's like it comes back to Parkinson's law of like, the storage container that you have, whatever you have will fill its capacity, right? And so for us, if we make less available to ourselves on the operating expense side, there's less available for us to spend. And so we don't tap into our profit account. We don't tap into our tax savings account. We strictly pull for anything operating expense that includes our salaries, that includes team salaries. We have to make with what's due inside of the operating expense account. And here's the thing is like, if you make less available to yourself, you're going to make it work.
Dude, right? The creativity, man. Like, I'm happy you said that. Like, I think putting constraints is so good and healthy. Like, it makes you be more creative, more scrappy. That's why it was actually, I mean, even this past weekend, me and Josh were at Geek Out, and I was talking to some people there, and the question I was asking was, they're like, ask questions like, it was a couple of agencies like, hey, like, should I hire more people? Should I scale up? Should I spend more? I'm like, well, first of all, like, what constraints are you putting on yourself? Like, I have to maintain this margin, or I have to maintain this headcount or this overhead expense. Because then like it forces you to think more creatively, like, okay, if I want to scale, I have to get this much revenue, or I need to hire these people from these countries to maintain that margin.
Yep. 100%. Yeah. And unfortunately, like, I'm not saying it's like, it's too late to do this stuff, but people that haven't been operating with that type of model in place, it's very difficult to now have that cash readily available. Cause obviously like that's a cash pile that we've been building for almost 2 years now.
Years, man. Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so these are things that if you haven't implemented them yet, start implementing them now. And it's like, it's investing, right? That's literally what it is. Like, if you're investing into the S&P 500 on a regular basis, you're not like in 2 weeks, you're not going to have this incredible portfolio of all of these stocks but it's like it's the consistent investment over time, right? And it's like 10 years from now, okay, cool, like now we have a great portfolio. And that's how it's been from our cash standpoint of like when we first started, we had a horrible cash standpoint because we just started, right? But as we continue to build on it, 2 years down the road, we have an incredible cash positioning, and it will allow us to weather a storm if we need to, but also invest, into growth for the business, right?
Yeah, dude, you're in a great standing. And actually, I want to get your thought on something. And how we're thinking about it a little bit is a recession happens, people are more cash conscious. They're holding back their wallets. Maybe their business is in decline, which I think is an important point, is that you and I, we're in the sick people business. Like we help sick businesses, right? Like we're in that business. So like really it's going to come down to how well can you position yourself as the answer to that? So I actually think it's like potentially a heyday, to be honest with you.
Oh, 100%.
If you can position it well.
Completely agree. Like this is the opportunity of really a lifetime for a marketing agency. A lot of agencies will grow exponentially during this time. A lot of consultancies will grow exponentially during this time. And this is why your education is so important as well, because you have to really be able to deliver a result during a down time. And if you can't deliver a result, right, you're going to end up losing those clients. And so this is where, the people that are true practitioners. Yeah, well, this is where it's like true practitioners of the craft and people that are well seasoned are going to excel. And people that have just been kind of flying by the seat of their pants, they're going to sink and they're going to fall. And the ones that haven't invested into perfecting that craft, and whether that's paid media, email marketing, SMS, like whatever your services are, if you haven't really been able to drive results for your clients, like your commodity service gets cut.
Bro, question for you. So this is something we're asking ourselves right now, frankly, is you talk about investing, you talk about services, investment in people, like the capability of your people. And especially if you're not the one doing the actual work anymore, like how well you've invested in their capability for them to handle these situations, dude, is like full stop. Like that's either going to burn you or it's going to make you rise.
Oh, 100%. And for us, like that's something that we preach a lot to our agencies that are growing is, as you bring on more staff, it isn't the time to pull back from leadership. It's time to double down on leadership.
Why do you think they struggle so much? Because like, me and you have talked, like that's like a huge component of like where they struggle.
It's the natural tendencies of a founder and an entrepreneur to do higher leveraged activities, right? Like that's the North Star goal for a lot of CEOs, right? Is to do the fun networking stuff, to travel more, to be able to go and land the larger deals, go be in boardrooms, which is all great stuff. It's all stuff that is absolutely necessary to grow the business. But where we often neglect is like at one point in time, like you were the main practitioner, right? And so you still have a duty to train your team to be able to fulfill like you, to be able to think like you, in order to build out that middle management team that you talk about and that you guys currently have. And it's because they're so good because you put the time into them. And a lot of times what we see across agencies is they try to skip that step, right? They get a fulfillment team and all of a sudden it's like, they got it. They'll self-educate. They'll have the bandwidth and the grit to kind of push through and educate like I did. Well, they're not vested like you are, right? And so with that being said, it's like those are things that you need to bring in during work hours, right? Those aren't things that, no one's going to stay up until midnight to learn a new media buying tactic, to get more efficient on the email marketing side for someone else's business, right? Those are things that you have to bring to the table for your team. And
it is. And funny you say that, because someone asked me, say, hey, why is it when I hire someone, they can't do as good as me, or they're not as interested in
they never will.
And they never will. I think so. One thing is like I try to look for obsession. Like I want to find obsessive people. Obsessive people tend to like go that extra mile. They're hard to find, but obsessive. But then the other thing is it comes back to still like, how are you reinforcing that skill set or that standard while they are there? Because like, and so you mentioned it, like maybe the highest leverage activity when you're hiring people is to multiply yourself before you go and do like the networking and the higher leverage activity you want to do.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, that's what we see often get skipped over is that they put a team in place and they're like, okay, they got it. No, like you still got to be in it with them. You still have to train them, like stay in the accounts with them, help them get to a point where they're as good as you, if not better. And then, obviously then they can kind of take the reins from there. And then that's when people are like, I got this, and they kind of like start pushing you away and out of the department. Like my favorite thing is like when, my team was like, Josh, like when you're here, you're hindering us. Like,
oh, that's so
like,
good.
Yeah. Like, that's the best case scenario of just like, hey, like Josh, like we're set. Like, we don't need you in this meeting. We don't need you. I'm like, cool. Like, let me know. Like if I'm getting in the way, that's perfect.
That's awesome.
And so that's where, you feel really good about the team of like, hey dude, like, why don't you just go focus on other stuff? Like, you don't need to focus on this right now. Like, we got it. It's like, awesome. That sounds great. And then obviously there's some checks and balances there, but
for sure. Standards you have to maintain.
Yeah, of course. But that's when you start to feel really good about things when like they start taking on more responsibility and they feel like they're actually excelling in their craft. That's when you get that extra buy-in from people and you get those players that you're talking about. But a lot of those people don't come in that way because they've never had the work experience to work for a high performance culture, right?
No.
And if you've never worked,
Japanese term called shuhari that we follow. So it's to like a shuhanari. And this is actually in Toyota way of lean leadership is like shu is I will do it and you will watch. The second phase is now you will do it, I will watch. And the third phase is after you master the first two phases, then you can actually do it and you master yourself. And like it's simple, it makes common sense, but like it's still like that's the process to get there.
Yeah, 100%. Love it, dude. If you guys have questions for Ray, come in and if you want to jam with Ray, there's the link in the chat. I'll drop it one more time for you guys. That way you can come and hang out with us. You drop it in the chat real fast. If you want to come hang, you're more than welcome. If you want to just drop questions in chat, you can do that. Oz said, that's fire. And you love to see it. Oz. Awesome. Ray, as people are kind of dropping questions, we'll kind of wrap things up here. But where can people find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter. I am Ray Johnston, probably I'm the most active right now because Twitter's blowing up. So that's a great place to find me. I'm constantly posting tweets and threads and stuff like that. You can also find me on Instagram, RGA Johnston. Those are probably the two places I'm the most active at this point.
Okay, cool. So go give Ray a follow if you guys are not following him currently. We'll wait here for just a couple more minutes here. See if there's any last questions that are coming in. Mr. Oz jumping in with us. You love to see it. So we'll jam with Oz here for a minute, and let's bring him in. The content god himself.
What's up, guys?
What's up, buddy?
Not much. I wanted to pick on Ray's mind.
Let's do it,
man.
Right. So I guess my biggest question is like you just launched essentially 2 new products or 2 SKUs for your agency. How do you determine how to price that? Right? Is it more of like based off of pod structure and then overhead and like what cushion you decide is good or not? And I don't know. That's more of my my question for you there.
Yeah, dude, really great question. So how I price the retention starting off with their retention team is, first of all, I did it based off of like how much time does it take for us to make an email, for example. And then number one, so then I kind of reverse engineer, okay. And then what's like a realistic for different tiers, so we have different packages, number of deliverables or emails that we'll make for clients in a month. And then from there, then I just came up with like, okay, if I know it takes me, for example, like everything considered between copy, design, sending for approvals, 2 hours to make an email, for example. Okay. Then I know like we have like an agency hourly rate we try to maintain. And so I add that to it and then I just do a math. Okay, I want to make sure I have this margin. Then I came up with like a cost of like $375 per an email, frankly. And so like, okay, cool. And then I know like for brands who are this size really only need these number of emails sent out a week, then I made a package 1. Then for brands at the next level, these need this much management, this number of emails. Then I made a price for package number 2, and then I just kind of price checked it from like what are other people pricing like in the space. I don't rely too much on that, frankly, because like I don't want that to skew how much I should be charging. I'd rather charge what I really need to be charging than like what they're charging. Yeah. And it just so happened that we came out at middle to actually high, a little bit on the high end, which is perfect for me because like our results speak for themselves, and I'd much rather overprice than underprice.
Right. And when do you know it's time to kick a skew?
Oh, dude, great question. So we actually did that already. So the problems will reveal themselves. So let me tell you what happened. So we actually used to do retention builds. So our clients like, hey, I don't want to work with you ongoing. Can you build do a wicked awesome automations and set me up and forms and all that? I was like, yeah, cool. I kicked it after the first 6 months for 2 reasons. One, the workload it required to do all that within a time span was just overtaxing my team. And so one build for an ecom brand equaled the space of 2 ongoing relationships over that time span because it's so intensive. But I priced them the same. So we're doing double the work, half the profits. So I was like, this sucks. And so I make an executive decision and also last one is I kicked it because we actually, over a longer period of time, brands get more profit in an ongoing relationship than a build. So for me, like the pros and cons just like were so diametrically opposed. I was like, I'm kicking it, man. Because like they're not getting the value, we're not getting the value, and it just made sense.
Got it. Interesting. So what do you kind of see to kind of like develop your team? Like what is typically like, like ground zero of where you start out? Like when it's like, it's time to kind of reinvest in the team. It's like, who kind of gets the juice first?
Yeah, dude, that's one of the best questions every agency owner should be asking, full stop. Like, how do I know it's time to invest in my team? I mean, the answer it should be is you never stop, but that's just not reality. Like we go through seasons where we have to. So typically when I know it's time to reinvest in my team is some warning signs like has churn changed or client performance changed, or are we no longer hitting KPIs like we were or we should be? So like those are like quantitative indicators. So I live by quantitative, but then also because I'm so close to my team in our calls, you can sense in the qualitative. And like I'm a huge fan of, I always want to check a person's thinking. So for example, I never accept, here's my work. I don't really care about what you work. I don't really care about the output, frankly. I care about the thought process you went through to get to the end result. So I'm always asking my questions that start with what and how, because those are open-ended and people has to reveal their thought process. So I'm like, cool. Like, for example, every one of our meetings, we always show off wins and failures for our meetings. I'm like, cool. They show me a win. Cool. What was the strategy that started that result, or what was the logic and the steps you went through to get that result, and how did you get that result? Because I care more about revealing their thought process, because that reveals everything. Like a person can't hide from their thoughts, and if they try to explain it, so if they're explaining to you and you're like, I don't understand, it's because they didn't understand what they were doing, frankly. If you can't explain what you were doing, then you really don't understand what you were doing. So that reveals the gaps. And then once you know the gaps, then you know where you need to invest in your team. So I hope that helps. Like that's kind of how I do it. So for example, I can give you a great example right now is for our Google team, YouTube, we haven't cracked YouTube the way I really wanted to. So I'm like, okay, why? So I said to my team, here, show me your campaigns, show me your YouTube ads. Okay. How did you make that YouTube ad? Or why did you use that YouTube ad and that copy and that ad versus something else? And so they have to explain it. And just through them explaining, I'm like, oh my gosh, like they have a complete gap in understanding proper placement of benefits, where that goes in the video, hooks, attention grabbing, like, or just like the atmosphere of YouTube. And I know I'm rambling, but like that through that process, it revealed their gap so that I can put in training and do a sprint on that to bring it up to what I think is the probable standard.
Got it. So pretty much it's kind of like flushing out where the team's shortcomings are, which I mean, I think everybody needs to really kind of be able to pinpoint.
And the only way to do that is through closeness. And I know you probably have a lot of remote people, but you've got to be close enough to them to ask those questions to reveal those gaps, frankly.
Yeah. Got it. Pretty cool stuff. I think that's everything I got top of mind.
Dude, great question.
Beautiful.
Honestly, solid question.
Yeah.
Love it. Thanks, Oz. Appreciate you, brother.
I appreciate you guys.
I'm going to bring Conan up here. Yo, what's up, brother?
What up? How you guys been?
How you doing? Good, man. Good.
Good.
Just jamming. Got some questions?
And I was like, I went on YouTube and I'm live. I'm like, let me go join.
Yeah,
So,
100%, man.
this
Are you on Safari
Go
by
ahead.
chance?
Yes.
Yeah, I knew it. So audio cuts out with Safari for some reason. It like gets really choppy. So if you want to rejoin with Google, but or just drop a question inside of the chat and we'll answer it for you. So if you guys ever want to join agency therapy, make sure you guys are on Google. For whatever reason, like it just does not work with Safari. Like the audio gets really chopped up and it just sounds horrible.
Yeah.
Drop a little question in the chat. We'll get it answered for you.
While he's doing that, Josh, I want to ask you, what tailwinds are you seeing when it comes to agencies, and how are you having your agencies prep for potential recession? We covered that a little bit, but I'd love to hear like how you guys are coaching, because you guys have just a vast amount of them that you work with.
Yeah, 100%. So obviously cash positioning is super important for us. So one of the first things that we teach when it comes to like financial modeling inside of agencies is the profit first methodology. If you can get 3 to 6 months worth of a war chest built out, you're going to be fine. In my opinion, like there's just, in my opinion, there's no scenario where you're going to take a hit for 3 to 6 months where you're bringing in $0 that we can't like fix. And so like we can have months where we go, into the red a little bit if we have that war chest built up. Now, of course, like at some point we do have to make tough decisions of like, hey, like if the client,
how do you know it's the
isn't
right
there,
time to make that decision? Because like we and you talked a little bit over the weekend, but like that's a hard choice to make, and a lot of people wait
very
too
tough.
long.
Yeah, very tough. And so for me, like it depends where the war chest actually is. So like say we have a 3-month store of cash. Normally what I'm gonna do is there's just no chance you're gonna bring in $0, right? Like that is the worst case possible scenario, that you lose all of your clients and you're bringing 0. We've yet to ever see that happen. Now we've seen people's knock on wood, right? Now we've seen people's revenue cut in half. With that being said, that means that if your revenue's cut in half, if you have a 3-month war chest, like all of your expenses covered, that should give you roughly a 6-month like lead time of like, hey, like we have this much revenue coming in and we can keep our team on staff for at least half of a year before we really get in a bad spot. Normally 2 to 3 months into tapping into that war chest where we're hitting negative months, that's where we're going to probably start looking at making cuts, right? And figuring out other options, right? Because at that point, like for me, it's consistency, right? Like I let the data talk, and the data has to be consistent enough for me to make those changes, whether it's an increase or decrease in revenue, right? So if we're seeing a decline, well, before I just go start chopping people's heads, I need to be able to see this on a regular cadence, right? Because we might bounce back 30 days from now. But if I see
every week, dude, agency life changes week to week.
Exactly. But if I see consistent drops 60, 90 days, then yeah, like we're going to have some tough conversations and we do our best to find, the people a place to land. But on the opposite side, the same goes for growth periods, right? I'm not just going to start hiring a bunch of people because we had the best month ever. Right?
Don't do that.
No, like that's like the worst option for you. Like we need to know that this is going to be consistent revenue over, a 3 to 6 month period. And like that we can actually build on this and stack revenue beyond where we're currently at. And so we look for trends in both directions, whether it's a negative trend or a positive trend, whether we hire or fire people. We're looking for trends, and that's basically what it is balancing those trends out and making sure that you have enough like a good cash position to weather the storm, But also,
how do you know the trends are consistent? So, like for example, let's say an agency, they don't have a consistent lead flow. However, they have brands wanting to work with them, and they're trying to decide, should I hire up because I've got a wait list, but I don't have control over my lead flow either.
Yeah, such a good question. So normally we kind of take it. There's a chart that we normally draw out for this, but I'll try to verbally explain it to you as much as possible. So when we see like peaks in revenue and we see increases in revenue, normally we're not going to make our hires right then and there. We're going to. I've got a spam bot dropping stuff inside of here. Hold on, let me block them real quick. That's so funny. xxx69.biz. You love to see it. You love to see it. I don't know if I can like delete these live, but
guys, don't click the link. Whatever you do, don't click the link.
Don't click the link. That's too funny. So normally what we're gonna see is on an uptrend, right? We're gonna want to see consistency on that uptrend. That's why we're a huge fan of putting agreements in place that are long term. So, starting off on 90-day agreements is normally what we recommend, and then expanding into 6 to 12-month agreements, right? Because that's going to give you projections, right? That's how you build projections for your business. And so when we see those trends start to happen, then we can go ahead and make hires based off of that, right? Because sometimes what happens is in like agency growth is not linear where we're just hockey sticking up. Like I wish it was. That'd be incredible. Yeah. But we're going to see dips in revenue, and so we want to see that consistency happen over time. And normally what we do is it's almost kind of like day trading. I don't know if you've ever like seen like
I tried my hand at it, dude. We won't go there.
I'm very novice when it comes to like understanding how to day trade, but I know that they look for specific like peaks and specific valleys, and there's like points where things kind of like level off, and it's like this is the new baseline, right? And so that's what we look for when it comes to revenues. We are looking for a new regular baseline of increase before we make that higher, right? Where we feel this is the baseline we can consistently hit 6, 12 months into the future, right? We don't just see a new peak and say higher, higher, higher. We have to see 2 to 3 months of data before normally we're making that decision.
So you
right?
have them sit tight, or at least they can prove that can continue. On that
I mean, that's the thing is like we always tap into the capacity of the team and say, hey, just a heads up, this is going to be some increased capacity for the next 30 to 60 days. Okay, it's going to get tough. We're going to be here to support you. We're starting the HR process of hiring people to help you guys, right? But we have to seek a little bit of consistency on our end on this revenue, this new revenue that's coming in. And we're starting the hiring process. So 30 to 60 days from now, you guys are going to have more people to help, but capacity is going to increase a little bit. And we're going to go through a stretch phase where we're stretching the team. And but we at least give our team a heads up here that these new clients are coming on board and that we're going to go through a stretch phase, right? And so with that being said, like when we have it a little bit more measured out, when we can project, we have 6 months worth of new agreements projected into the future, then that's when we make our hires, right? And so it's really based off of projections of where we're going to be.
Too, like how confident are you?
Yeah, because at the end of the day, like people drop agreements all the time, and so that's where you have to be confident in your service delivery that what you're going to do is actually going to happen, right? And so we want to make sure that that's the case. So
and even for
I don't know if that was helpful. Hopefully
it does. And I think about that too. Like we were trying to make a decision, okay, for our 2 new services agencies that we built, is like what's the 2023 look like, the growth for them. And so for me, it's all about just my confidence level with my ability to hire, maintain lead flow and closing. So like it's for me, unless I can maintain, unless I have full control over my lead flow, my confidence is low. But if I have control over it, I can scale it up or scale it down, then cool. Like my confidence is there in my closing ability. So for us, that's why I asked that question, because like so much that requires like lead flow. Do you have control on it? Great. If you don't, well, then your confidence really probably isn't that high.
Yep. 100%. Completely agree. A couple more questions down the chat. I don't know if Oz came in and asked this one, but he said, when do you know it's time to kick a pod or lean out a team? For us, at least on my end, something that we take into consideration, of course, is profitability of the business, profitability of that specific pod, and we do our best to keep our team staffed. But at the same time, if it's unprofitable, it's like you have other mouths to feed within the business, and if it's something that is a detriment to that pod, then of course, like, we're going to make those changes as needed. But normally, we're not going to try and push through and normally if it's like 60 days, like that's like what I'm willing to lose on it, in my opinion, of like 60 days of like, we'll go negative for the team 60 days to see if the pod can wrangle it back, or if we can get new lead flow or whatever it is back into that. After 60 days, we're going to probably look at leaning out that pod. So at least in my opinion. I don't know what you think, Ray.
No, I agree with that. It kind of comes down to, number one, why do you feel like you have to lean out? Number two, or if that team isn't performing, why aren't they performing, for example? Because there may be different root causes for those. So I mean, for us, like, as a measure of leaning out, we didn't rehire certain roles that we let people go because they aren't performing, or we kind of muscle people out of the business. We just didn't rehire. And so that was a version we did for leaning out. But then sometimes you have to let a whole team go because they can't perform, and they not performing, is that because of they don't want to, they don't have the ability to do it, they weren't clear on what the KPIs were for that standard. So I think it is kind of nuanced. My only request is, and this is something I'm big on, is when you think about letting someone go, like, take a look in the mirror rather than out the window. First in the mirror is like, okay, why aren't they performing? Do they know what performing looks like? Do they have clear KPIs and standards and expectations with that? Because if they don't, and I've fired people who I didn't have that, and like I was to blame, that they may have actually been a star performer if they had that clarity of what that looks like for their role. So my only request is, do a 30-day personal improvement plan. Be annually clear on, like, here's what I expect. Here are the standards. If you can't hit that, or you have gaps, cool, let's discover those to see where you lack training. But make that clear, because you always want a standard to measure against. So then you're crystal clear on what the next step is. But if you don't have a standard, how can you say they're not performing if they don't have a standard to follow?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Completely agree with that. Awesome. Good question, Oz. And then Oz had one more question as well. And then this will be the last question of the night, because I know you have family and stuff, right? I want to make sure that we give you some time here to go be with them at the end of the night. But what are the 1 to 2 questions you ask all potential hires?
Really great question. It does change. A question I'm gonna be asking in the next round of hires we actually got from a friend of ours, James Van Elswick, that I really like is let's say I brought you on day 1 and I didn't tell you what to do. What will you do? And that question reveals, are they going to sit there? Are they going to go and find what to do? Are they going to go talk to people? Because you want to reveal, like, what kind of person are they? Because we want people who are obsessive and, like, honestly, like, they'll take and they'll run with it. For example,
they'll figure it out.
Yeah, like, I actually had a coaching with a girl I hired 3 months ago. It was her past her like parole phase, and she did that. She's like, listen, like, you gave me a lot of great instruction. There were times that I wasn't quite clear on the next step, but, like, I went and did X, Y, and Z, and I figured it out. I'm like, great, like, that's exactly what I wanted. Because, like, I'm not perfect. Like, I have errors myself. So that's a question I'm going to start asking for every interview going forward, number 1.
Yeah. It's such a good question, man. And this is something, like, I haven't really interviewed that many people in the last 2 years, just because we run things pretty lean over at the consultancy. So it's like, we don't need
so jealous.
I know, man. So, like, we don't need a ton of staff yet, but something that I haven't even really thought about recently. But I always like to see what they're interested in. And I don't make all my hiring decisions based off of this, but I want people that are aligned in my values with me. So it's like, I want to know about their exercise routine. I want to know about, do they have certain nutrition habits that they follow? And like I said, I'm not going to make all of my decisions based off of this, but I kind of find that people that have similar values to me are going to be people that are going to really excel in the culture that we built, right? And so as a founder, like if you have a certain culture that you're trying to build, it really reflects back on those values as well, that you hold true to yourself and hold true to the company, right? So I ask a lot of questions specifically around those things, and it helps me really vet out people that probably aren't a good culture fit, because it's like, hey, like this is the type of culture that we have here, and it's like you can tell when people are not a good fit for what you're doing,
Dude.
right? It's like doesn't mean that they're a bad fit or bad at their job as a practitioner, but it's like, for us, like culture is extremely important. Like we want to be aligned here. We want people that that feel very accepted, and if you don't do some of the things that we probably do on a regular cadence, like you're probably going to feel a little left out, and it's probably not going to be as fun for you to work here. And so for me, it's like I'm just watching out for them at the end of the day, because I want people to feel very accepted. And one thing that I've kind of noticed with culture is that people that aren't well accepted stick out like a sore thumb.
Oh,
right?
Totally. Honestly, like not that they are toxic, but it becomes a toxic trait in your organization because they don't align with you. Not that they are toxic, it just doesn't mesh well.
100%. Yeah, 100%. So awesome, man. Well, hey, want to make sure that we're ending on time here today. Ray, thank you so much for joining us. You guys, go follow Ray on Twitter and Instagram. He's super active on Twitter. He posts some of the most fire tweets on the platform. He is officially verified on Twitter. Aren't you? You got the blue check?
I'm paying it today.
Okay. He's getting on board. I know you
But
shot me a
did you
message.
hear? Elon's been letting it slip that your reach may be lessened if you're not verified. So now, like, there's actually a potential value why you want to be verified besides the check.
Yeah, there you go. So go get verified. Support the Elon Musk Foundation. He needs a little bit more money in the pockets. He just paid a decent chunk of change for Twitter. So awesome. Thank you, Ray. I appreciate your time, brother. I will tell you this right now. You have had the greatest retention across any of our agency therapy guests. Hands down. We've had.
I'll be asked back again.
Oh, 100%, dude.
Yeah.
100%.
You're accountable.
That's right. You're dropping fire the whole time, man. So I really appreciate it. You guys, don't forget to please like the live on YouTube. Also, if you're watching from LinkedIn or other channels, please go and like that as well. Don't forget to subscribe before you leave. Subscribe to the channel. Helps us and helps you know when we post more. And lastly, if you have any other questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Workwithhydra.com. You can book a call with us, agency audit session, if you are wondering what it looks like to work with us, or if you're just wanting to get some insight on how you can grow your agency a little bit faster, a little bit more efficiently. So appreciate you guys. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you on the next one. We'll be back next week with somebody. I don't know. I can't remember who, but we're going to be back with someone. I don't know who it is exactly, but we have people scheduled out. I think maybe, you know who it is? It's Rush. Rush will be on, I believe,
that'd be a great one.
Next week, or maybe it's the week after. No, he's the week after. Oh, you know who it is? It's John. John Danes will be on next week. So if you guys want to come hang out with John Danes next week, he will be on next week. So and we'll have that pre-scheduled, so you guys will have an idea of when it's going to launch. It probably will not be the same time, but we'll keep you updated on when those times and dates are. So thank you guys again. Much love. Ray, thank you again, brother. Appreciate you. We'll see you guys in the next one.